colleagues, please take a seat. Now we are a bit en retard. This means, on the one hand, by the culinarian side of Spain, and on the other hand, of the political dimension of Spain, but we are autonomous, and now we go on. But you know that those of you who want to assist in the cathedral, this religious ceremony, let's say, for peace of three religions, then you should leave at 5 o'clock. The others can stay here. I will be here with you because I'm not a captain, but as we say, in a sinking boat, the captain has to leave last at the last. But we are not sinking, now we are uprising. So I give the floor then to Professor Evgeny Tanchev. I'm very happy that he comes to us, Advocate General at the European Court of Justice and former President of the Bulgarian Constitutional Court. We are old friends. He belongs, it's a pillar of our constitutional law family, and I'm happy that he is here. And you know that we are a bit limited in time, but as we are accustomed to be concentrated, focused, and concise, then it will be good. And this gives us impulsations, and that's fine. I think that we have the first, what is on the program? You have not the program. But I think that Bertrand Mathieu would be the first, and then here. And if you might come here, Professor Bertrand Mathieu, professeur de Paris 1, Panthéon-Sorbonne, et maintenant il est conseiller d'État. Non, 2 est aussi bien, mais c'est un, Panthéon-Sorbonne, et conseiller d'État, et vice-président de l'Association internationale du droit constitutionnel, et également ancien président de l'Association française des droits des constitutionnalistes, dont je suis un membre. Alors merci pour être venu pour un bref temps, parce qu'il doit retourner bientôt à Paris et de nous présenter des réflexions sur, et ça veut dire sur une question qui s'insère dans l'atelier 3, et ça veut dire la dimension de l'état de droit externe ou supranationalisé ou internationalisé. Alors, c'est à vous. C'est un grand thème, naturellement, mais nous sommes... Oui, merci, cher Bertrand.
Merci beaucoup, cher Rainer, et merci surtout d'organiser ces rencontres qui sont à la fois très riches et qui sont aussi l'occasion de retrouver des amis. Et merci aussi de maintenir ce principe du bilinguisme et de permettre de s'exprimer aussi en français. Et je voudrais de ce point de vue-là remercier très sincèrement Rainer. L'état de droit et la construction européenne. Je crois que si l'on veut véritablement comprendre ce qui se joue, et la question a été abordée ce matin, il faut, dans le système occidental, distinguer ce qui relève de la démocratie et ce qui relève du libéralisme. En fait, on vit dans un système mixte, démocratique, libéral. La démocratie fonde la légitimité du pouvoir dans le peuple, qui manifeste ainsi sa souveraineté. Le système libéral prévoit des mécanismes de contrepoids, de contrôle, visant à limiter l'exercice du pouvoir à le modérer et relève de ce libéralisme notamment la séparation des pouvoirs. L'utilisation contemporaine du terme démocratie confond ces deux aspects du système occidental. Et l'inconvénient, on peut discuter à l'infini des définitions de la démocratie, mais l'inconvénient de cette définition très large, trop large de mon point de vue de la démocratie, est qu'elle masque les contradictions et les conflits qui aujourd'hui opposent ou peuvent opposer la démocratie et le libéralisme. Ces conflits mettent non seulement en relation, mais aujourd'hui en opposition, d'un côté la souveraineté du peuple, avec ses corollaires, la volonté générale et l'intérêt général, et d'autre part des droits individuels, le pouvoir du juge, le droit des communautés. La notion d'État de droit vise à assurer la protection du citoyen contre un État qui aurait tendance à en abuser. Mais cet État de droit peut être aussi, et c'est le cas parfois, reçu par les citoyens comme un instrument de subordination du peuple. La démocratie, si on parle de l'Europe, et c'est un simple constat, la démocratie est née et s'est développée dans le cadre étatique. Elle présuppose l'existence d'un peuple inscrit dans des frontières. Ce peuple n'existe que s'il est uni par le partage de valeurs communes. À défaut, c'est la coexistence d'individus et de communautés. Et l'exercice du pouvoir dans la démocratie vise à déterminer l'intérêt commun à la communauté nationale. Si on regarde cette situation et qu'on l'examine au regard de l'Union européenne, la construction européenne manifeste la création d'un ordre juridique dont les fondements ne sont pas démocratiques, mais reposent sur les États. Le problème, là encore, il y a un faux semblant, puisque l'on part d'un postulat selon lequel il n'y a d'ordre juridique légitime que démocratique. À partir du moment, l'Union européenne ne peut être que démocratique afin d'être légitime. Et témoignent de ce caractère les références quasiment incantatoires à la démocratie qui scandent les textes fondamentaux de l'Union européenne. Dans le projet de traité sur l'Union européenne, on trouve le mot au moins une quinzaine de fois. Le traité européen accorde une place spécifique à la démocratie, et c'est là que c'est intéressant, distincte à la fois de l'affirmation des droits, de l'état de droit. L'article 6 dit que l'Union est fondée sur les principes de la liberté, de la démocratie, du respect des droits de l'homme, ainsi que de l'état de droit. Le problème, c'est que si on énumère comme ça un certain nombre de catégories, c'est qu'elles ne veulent pas dire toutes la même chose. En réalité, l'Union européenne est fondée sur un accord entre États. La constitution d'un groupement d'États est fondée sur les règles du droit international, et le droit international est totalement étranger au modèle démocratique. Une constitution démocratique suppose l'existence d'un peuple souverain. Pas de peuple, pas de souverain, pas de légitimité démocratique. Ces affirmations tranchées doivent être immédiatement nuancées par une remarque selon laquelle l'absence de légitimité démocratique comme principe fondateur de l'Union européenne n'épuise pas la question de la démocratie au sein de l'Union européenne. Et au sein de l'Union européenne, le Parlement européen présente la spécificité d'asseoir sa légitimité sur l'élection des membres par les citoyens. Et là, on retrouve à nouveau une ambiguïté, puisque l'identification de la citoyenneté européenne est conceptuellement difficile à partir du moment où cette citoyenneté n'est qu'un additif à la qualité de citoyen d'un État à laquelle elle est liée. Cependant, quelle que soit la nature de la citoyenneté européenne, le Parlement européen représente bien les citoyens européens par lesquels les membres sont directement élus. Mais il y a un certain nombre d'obstacles qui, là, ne sont pas de nature abstraite, conceptuelle, mais de nature pratique à la représentation des citoyens. Les parlementaires européens sont élus dans des circonscriptions nationales, sont des modes de scrutin organisés nationalement. Et l'ancrage national de la représentation au niveau de l'Union européenne s'ajoute à l'absence d'un véritable espace politique européen. Le Parlement joue un rôle assez ambigu mais central dans la sphère de la démocratie européenne. Mais cette expression démocratique européenne est concurrencée par d'autres formes d'expression qui ne relèvent pas d'une légitimité de même nature et qui non seulement n'ont pas la même légitimité mais ne fonctionnent pas selon des principes démocratiques. C'est le cas notamment de la Commission qui représente les intérêts propres de l'Union européenne et elle joue un rôle moteur. C'est une super administration européenne, elle s'est dotée d'une puissance politique qui ne repose pas sur une légitimité démocratique. C'est le cas aussi, bien entendu, de la Cour de justice de l'Union européenne, qui là aussi a un rôle extrêmement important dans la construction européenne, mais qui marque un phénomène que l'on observe partout en Europe, c'est la subordination du politique au juge. Et ça, c'est une véritable question. Cependant, l'Union européenne est une entité structurante de nos sociétés politiques. Et le fait qu'elle ne relève que marginalement d'une logique démocratique n'enlève rien à son impérative nécessité dans un monde où les nations européennes seraient trop faibles. Et je crois que le défi aujourd'hui, c'est de concilier les exigences européennes avec les démocraties nationales. Et quelques éléments très généraux de ce point de vue. Il convient d'abord de déterminer clairement ce qui doit relever des compétences confiées aux structures européennes et les compétences qui doivent rester entre les mains des États. Et je crois que l'effort fondamental à faire est, dans ce débat, de distinguer ce qui relève de l'identité européenne et ce qui relève des identités nationales. Cette distinction doit s'appliquer aussi bien à la répartition des compétences entre les États au sein de l'Union européenne, mais aussi à la délimitation des compétences de la Cour européenne des droits de l'homme. La perte de confiance que l'on observe aujourd'hui partout ou presque dans nos démocraties traditionnelles tient à deux éléments parmi d'autres. Cette perte, le sentiment vrai ou faux que les peuples ont le sentiment de perdre leur identité et le fait qu'ils élisent des représentants, des dirigeants politiques qui sont très largement impuissants. À la vision utopique d'une société sans barrière territoriale, sans unité culturelle, il convient d'opposer la coexistence de deux niveaux de société. Une société forte, organisée, culturellement homogène au niveau national. Une société plus ouverte aux différences entre les peuples qui la composent, enrichie des différences de culture nationale, réunie par un patrimoine commun et mettant en commun les instruments de son développement économique et la défense de sa place dans le monde. Et ça relève de l'Europe. Il s'agit d'engager une réflexion sur ce que les États entendent réellement mettre en commun. Ainsi, par exemple, l'existence d'une monnaie unique implique une politique fiscale harmonisée. Le processus d'extension indifférenciée des compétences de l'Union européenne doit être freiné, quitte à renforcer des compétences européennes sur des questions importantes qui lui échappaient, par exemple en matière de défense. L'Europe a une vocation économique et géopolitique, elle a moins vocation à réglementer la vie quotidienne des citoyens. Plus concrètement, si l'on admet que le Parlement est l'organe démocratique de l'Union européenne, il convient de créer les conditions d'un véritable débat politique européen sur les sujets relevant de la compétence de l'Union européenne. L'élection des parlementaires européens au scrutin proportionnel dans le cadre national sur des enjeux de politique nationale ne répond aucunement à cette exigence. L'identité des députés européens, la répartition politique, le terrain de jeu des députés européens échappent à la compréhension des citoyens. On pourrait imaginer que le Parlement européen soit composé à la fois de représentants des parlements nationaux, élus en leur sein, et de représentants de l'Union, élus non plus sur la base de listes nationales, mais sur celle de listes européennes, portant sur un projet politique européen dans le cadre de du champ de compétences de l'Union européenne. Il s'agit en fait, et je termine ces quelques réflexions par là, de redonner au peuple la maîtrise d'une part de son destin. Cette maîtrise ne peut s'exercer que dans un cadre national, ce qui n'exclut nullement le partage de certaines compétences au niveau européen. Cette maîtrise implique également le respect par les juges des décisions prises par le pouvoir politique. L'enjeu n'est autre que de réintroduire de la démocratie dans un ordre juridique qui échappe à la légitimité démocratique, de retisser le lien entre le peuple et la décision politique. Là, encore une fois, la crise de la démocratie, elle est là. Le vote n'embraye plus sur la décision politique parce que le pouvoir politique n'appartient plus aux élus, très largement. Je caricature. C'est à mon avis la crise fondamentale. À défaut, l'Europe ne sera rêvée que par une élite intellectuelle. Elle sera l'instrument d'une élite technocratique et la construction abstraite d'une élite juridique. Et contre cette vision, le peuple se rebellera un jour ou l'autre. Les citoyens doivent pouvoir participer à cette construction européenne. L'équilibre entre l'état de droit européen et la démocratie et les démocraties nationales est incontestablement à inventer ou à réinventer. Et encore une fois, je termine par cette phrase. Le fait d'en appeler de manière quasiment incantatoire à l'état de droit, et l'état de droit est incontestablement une bonne chose en lui-même, le fait d'en appeler de manière incantatoire à l'état de droit masque les problèmes dont nous devons discuter. Sur ces problèmes, nous pouvons avoir des convictions et des analyses divergentes. Mais il faut en parler, il faut en discuter, et je crois que cette construction européenne à laquelle nous tenons tous est probablement conditionnée par notre capacité à échanger et à discuter. Je vous remercie.
Merci, professeur Bertrand Mathieu, for your interesting contribution. And now we will have the other approach, not from the État de droit concept, but from the rule of law concept to the EU. It's very interesting. I would not like to lose time because we have so many interesting speakers. But the problem is that initially it was thought that rule of law is purely common law concept evolving from the English law. Later came État de droit with Immanuel Kant and all the very important figures we know in German philosophy and in French also, philosophy of law. But actually, when addressing multi-level constitutionalism, it's very difficult to speak about État de droit because we don't have the État in the face of European Union. So we address it with the rule of law. And with this very short remark, I'm giving the floor to Professor Joël Rideau.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you also to Rainer, my old friend, with our meeting each year. Thanks to him, sort of accomplishment over the years, which is quite admirable, in fact. Well, Rainer, you asked me to speak in English, which is a big risk you took, but I am trying to answer to your wish. So my title of my contribution is Successes and Setbacks in Establishing the Rule of Law in the European Union. I shall first quote Article 2 of the Treaty of the European Union as a starting point of my short study. Its importance seems of particular interest in a period when multiple challenges to these values are emerging from various parts of the Union, and more various parts of the Union. So I quote Article 2. Everybody knows it, I think, but it is not useful to quote it. I read, the Union is founded on the values of respect for human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law, and respect for human rights, including the rights of persons belonging to minorities. These values are common to the member states in a society in which pluralism, non-discrimination, tolerance, justice, solidarity, and equality between women and men prevail. Well, what a program. References to the rule of law can be found in the preamble of the European Union Treaty and its Article 21 relating to the external action of the Union. It forms also a constant background for the text of the European treaties, of the Charter of the Fundamental Rights of the European Union, and of the European Convention of Human Rights too. The rule of law is also a recurring leitmotif in the national constitutions of democratic states, more or less explicitly, and in international instruments of protection of human rights. A quick overview reveals instantly the differences between the contents given in the different legal systems to the concept of the rule of law, notwithstanding the existence of some bridges or light links. First subtitle, Communauté de droit. Walter Einstein, then president of the Commission, EC Commission, used for the first time the expression Communauté de droit in a press conference given in 1959. The Communauté de droit was from the start conceived as inspired by the principle of the rule of law. It was obviously full of shortcomings and appeared as an objective to reach more than an established reality. The revisions of the community's treaties and the adoption of new treaties brought further improvements at the levels of the communities, then of the Union, and of the member states. The Court of Justice of the European Communities has explicitly integrated the concept in the terminology it uses. It declares, for the first time in its judgment, in case of Parti écologiste Les Verts versus the European Parliament, it must be emphasized, I quote, in this regard, that the European Economic Community is a community based on the rule of law. In the French version of the court decisions, Communauté de droit, in German, another expression, Rechtsgemeinschaft, would you excuse my accent? Inasmuch, I quote the English version, as neither its member states nor its institutions can avoid the review of the question whether the measures adopted by them are in conformity with the basic constitutional charter, the treaty. The expression was quite often used after that to uphold the decisions of the court on various points, especially on the point of the completude of the system of control, judicial control in the European communities. Second subtitle, Union de droit. The creation by the Treaty of Maastricht of an European Union can be seen as a prolongement of the preceding case law about the European Community. The Court considered naturally the Union as an union de droit founded on the rule of law. This trend was enhanced by the Treaty of Maastricht, then by the Treaty of Amsterdam, which considered the rule of law as a founding principle of the Union. One difficulty was the extension of the rule of law principles to the fields of the second and third pillars of the Union, where the intergovernmental method prevailed. Another is a situation prevailing in some new member states where the existence of these veilers appear somewhat uncertain, that's the least to say, and at least more than the others. The Court of Justice of the European Union has, after the entry into force of the Lisbon Treaty, used rather frequently the expression union de droit, substitute to communauté de droit, as a consequence of taking into account the developments brought by the Maastricht Treaty, the Treaty of Amsterdam, then by the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, and by the Treaty of Lisbon, of course. The first decision using the expression union de droit occurred in 2010 in a case, procedure pénale against E and F. In the English version, the court emphasized that it should be noted that the European Union is based on the union of law, in the rule of law, sorry. In the German text, Rechtsunion. So not in the English version, there is no specific expression corresponding to union de droit or to the German expression I just quoted. The expression has been currently used by the court since then, drawing all the consequences from the proclamation of the rule of law as a veiler by the Treaty of Lisbon. The rule of law appears by some sides granted, but remains by others as an aim to reach and even to define, especially with the inputs brought by the court's case law. Improvements acquired at one time can sometimes be overwhelmed or compromised later. The treaty establishing a constitution for Europe has identified the rule of law as one of the founding values, confirming the Treaty of Amsterdam and the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. It also reinforced on different points various elements of the rule of law, such as the system of the sources of law, the judicial system, and the rank of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, classified by the Lisbon Treaty as a part of the primary law of the Union. Following Article 2, considering that the Union is founded on different values, including the rule of law, Article 6 of the Treaty on the European Union appears as what I would call a textbook of different elements, some new, some others traditional, of the Union of Law. First paragraph of the article, the Charter of the Fundamental Rights of the European Union becoming a primary law of the Union with the same value, legal value as the treaties. Second paragraph, the accession of the Union to the European Union, which was not, of course, achieved, due to the rather awkward, I think, from my point of view, advice given by the Court of Justice of the European Communities in 2013 case. And the third paragraph, I quote, fundamental rights as guaranteed by the European Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms as they result from the constitutional traditions common to the member states shall constitute, says the article, general principles of the Union's law. And this is, in a certain way, a constitutionalization of the case law of the Court of Justice of the European Community, with a reference so to the European Convention of Human Rights, and also to the traditional principles recognized by the constitutions of the member states. One point which I would like to reach now is the question of admissions of new member states. The evolution has underlined the need to set conditions for the membership of the Union. At the beginning, the admission to the communities was linked only with the geographical situation of the candidates, which could only be European states. In fact, an unwritten criterion was from the start the democratic character of the state. The criteria required were progressively elaborated by the European Council and became known as the Copenhagen's criteria, partly incorporated in the treaties. I quote, stability of the institutions guaranteeing democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and respect for the protection of minority. Finally, a functioning market economy and the ability to cope with competitive pressure and market forces within the EU. Article 49 states actually that any European state which respects the values referred to in Article 2 and is committed to promoting them may apply to become a member of the Union. The European Parliament and national parliaments shall be notified of this application. And so on and so on. The procedure is described by the article. And the conditions of admission and the adjustments to the treaties on which the Union is founded, which such admission entails, shall be subject to an agreement between the member states and the applicant state. This agreement shall be submitted for ratification by all the contracting states in accordance with their respective constitutional requirements. Can I have some water, please? This text implies, of course, a survey of the situation of the candidates whose admission may be submitted to conditions inducing more or less important changes in its legal order and practices in order to satisfy the requirements imposed to the member states. The candidate must also become a party of the Council of Europe and have ratified the European Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms. On this point, one, of course, can pose the question if maybe some admissions which were realized were not too prematurate, considering the situations prevailing in the new member states, in some new member states. But, well, that's another story. Control of the respect of values by the member states. Article 7 of the Treaty of the European Union has organized a mechanism of control of the member states after their admission. But first, one must note that there is no possibility, I will say maybe unfortunately, to exclude a member state. This only possibility given by Article 7 is to suspend certain of the rights deriving from the application of the treaties to the member state in question, including the voting rights of the representative of the government of that member state in the council. I won't go exactly in the procedure of Article 7. And just note that its main feebleness is the necessity to get majority, an unanimity, to put it completely into action and decide the sanctions that can be pronounced under its text, which of course makes very difficult its application to a situation prevailing in certain member states who obviously do not respect the rule of law, the principle of the rule of law, and put in question the application of the rule of law in the Union. One must stress so the difficulty provided by this requirement of unanimity at a certain stage of the procedure of Article 7. Also, one can ask, is the judicial weapon against the state useful, and can it achieve real results against the state deciding that he will not respect the rule of law? I'm not sure that the judicial remedies are satisfactory for that. The rule of law can be something useful to react to certain situations, but only to punctual violations of the rule of law. If a state decides that some actual states, member states, have done to fight against the rule of law, I don't think that the intervention of judges will be the way to stop those situations. I think when such a situation becomes endemic, the only way is a political way. There's no judicial solutions, but only political solutions which can be useful and leads to real results. So, to conclude, as I say that in spite of the improvements brought by the Treaty of Lisbon to the system of sources prevailing in the European Union and the protection of the fundamental rights, the Union de droit remains imperfect and under growing threats This assessment sheds light on the necessity for further steps, which of course imply an awakening of the member states and of their peoples. But who will be the charming prince or the charming princess? Thank you.
Merci, professor Rideau, pour votre très intéressant overview of rule of law supranational dimension of rule of law. And now we go to our third person. This is Natalia Mushek and Viktor Muravyov. Multi-level constitutionalism and the rule of law.
Chairman, dear the participants of the Congress, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to express my gratitude to Professor Arnold for the invitation and for the opportunity to make the report. And the topic of my presentation will be multi-level constitutionalism and the rule of law. Frankly speaking, the initial title of the presentation was the development of the constitutionalism under the European Union law. However, Professor Arnold has made some corrections to the title, and I must admit he has got it. So, the rule of law. It's really it's an integral part of any democratic society, and today in modern societies, especially in all democracies, the concept of rule of law is researched for really a long time. When I was analyzing the constitutions of the European countries, I faced with a very important aspect, that the Spanish Constitution, only the Spanish Constitution, contains the most concrete provisions on the rule of law. For example, the citation is, the courts control the power to issue regulations and to assure that the rule of law prevails in administrative actions. Courts as well as prosecutors are subject to the rule of law. However, what is the main problem? That today we do not have the clear, accurate, and precise definition of the rule of law. In Ukraine, there were some attempts to provide the definition. For instance, the Ukrainian constitutional judge, Serhiy Galavati, who is also the author of 3 volumes work on the rule of law, states that the rule of law has been variously interpreted, but it must be distinguished from a purely formalistic concept under which any action of a public official, which is authorized by law, is said to fulfill its requirements. Then, over time, the concept of rule of law was distorted, and today it's really under the problem how to interpret the rule of law, because it's equivalent. Sometimes it's distorted as a rule by the law or even a law by rules. According to Galavati, these interpretations permitted authoritarian actions by governments and do not reflect the meaning of the rule of law today. The Venice Commission, it's within the Council of Europe, also tries to solve problems related to the definition of the rule of law. For example, in 2007, it adopted the resolution on its parliamentary assembly on the rule of law, trying to clarify the notion and content or scope of this notion. Guided by this resolution, the European Court of Human Rights also states that today we have to understand the concept of rule of law does not from its first originate, for example, the legitimacy, its narrow sense, but we have to spread it into the procedural aspects, for example, due course, also the separation of powers, equality before the law, and so on. In 5 years, the Venice Commission also adopted the second document, and it's called as the report on the rule of law. It was devoted to the concept of this rule of law concept, and the document expanded to the 8 ingredients or so-called components of the rule of law. They are accessibility of the law, questions of legal rights should be normally decided by law, equality before the law, power must be exercised lawfully and reasonably, human rights must be protected, means must be provided to resolve disputes without undue cost or delay, trials must be fair, compliance by state with obligations under international and national laws. But to my mind, this list is not complete, because I would like to add this list by human dignity. Further, in 2016, the Venice Commission adopted the rule of law checklist. Checklist is called as a document that is confirmed that the rule of law is linked not only the human rights that was mentioned yesterday, but also the democracy, the third principle of the Council of Europe. It means the involvement of people over the decision-making process and the protection of them. But what was the most important under the checklist, that this document stipulated that the rule of law has become a global ideal and aspiration. Those components, I mean 8 components, they are constant, but what is the difference? It is the manner how these components are realized, because it depends on constitutional order, it depends on historical ties and other issues. Maybe I will not in detail stop on the legal basis of this concept within the European Union, because it was mentioned in details by Mr. Rideau, but I will make some maybe differences between how this rule of law is regulated by the European Union dimensions. For example, to simplify the procedure, how to understand it, I divide the external and internal dimension of the concept of rule of law. What does mean the internal concept? The internal concept means that this is within the European Union and its member states. And the external dimensions, it's towards the third countries, for example, for Ukraine. The internal dimension also was enshrined in Article 7 in the Amsterdam Treaty. And it contains 3 main stages for providing sanctions against the member states that breaches the rule of law. The Council, acting a qualified majority, might decide to suspend certain of the rights deriving from the application of the treaties, including the voting rights of the representatives of member states. In doing so, the Council shall take into account the possible consequences of such suspension of the rights and obligations of natural and legal persons. This mechanism has proved to be not efficient, and today also there are some disturbance about adoption the new regulation that will settle this issue. For example, there were 2 main cases where the European Court of Justice decided to initiate the procedure about not the violation of Article 2 of the Treaty of the European Union, I mean the violation of the fundamental values or principles, for example, the rule of law, but it, I mean the European Court of Justice, it chose the most simplest way. What I mean, I will explain later. In case of Poland, the crisis has been resolved in 2018 when a new legislation was adopted that alleviated some Commission's concerns about the Justice Ministry's ability to fire the heads of courts without any consultations, the equal retirement age for male and female judges, the publication of 3 constitutional court rulings from 2016 blocked by the government. Under the Commission opinion, the progress reached is not satisfactory. The same situation happens also in Hungary. And at that time, the states were reluctant to use Article number 7 for making Hungary to comply with common values. The Commission brought the matter before the EU Court of Justice, and the Commission found that Hungary failed to fulfill its obligations not under the Article 2 of TEU, but it was the violation of 2 main directives. The first directive concerns the free movement of persons and the protection of data, and the second one concerns also the occupation and employment for citizens. So in both cases, rule of law was partially protected in linkage to the norms of the EU secondary legislation. It seems that the Commission and the EU Court of Justice were not willing to initiate procedure for the alleged breach of the rule of law, since they were afraid that the protection of individual rights and independence of judicial power are the constitutional principles that are beyond the scope of the European Union. They made the simplest solution of this problem, and the Commission brought the case before the court on the basis of Article 263 of the TFEU, according to which the Court of Justice is empowered to review the legality of EU legislative acts. Frankly speaking, the situation hasn't been changed. And the European Parliament today, just I told about endorsing the draft concerning the new regulation, where the member states that threaten the rule of law, that is the governments of which are imputed in interference with the judicial protection, also corruption, fraud, will be deprived from the access to the European Union funds. This protection, I must admit, it will be only fragmentary character, and it will not solve the problem at all. Also, I may focus on some cases, but they were made in details by Professor Rideau. So it was the internal dimension. The second is the external one, means the application of these requirements also in the external relations of the EU towards the third countries. For instance, in the association agreements. When we are talking about the association agreement concluded between Ukraine and the European Union, the rule of law concept appears twice in the preamble and Article 3 or 4. Under the provisions of those articles, the parties recognize that the rule of law, good governance, the fight against corruption, the fight against the different forms of transnational organized crime, promotion of sustainable development, and effective multilateralism are central to enhancing the relationship between the parties. The external dimension also is fully reflected in Article 209 of TFEU. According to this, the Union may conclude with third countries and competent international organizations any agreement helping to achieve the objectives referred to the Article 21. So, of the lack of time, I will make some conclusions. The first one is the challenge for the future is how the achievement of the rule of law will be preserved, developed, under the circumstances that individuals are increasingly influenced and linked by the modes of the government. This topic is not related to international organizations, but also it has a big concern with the public and private relationships. It seems that until we have a precise and accurate definition of the rule of law, this EU common value could not be properly protected and developed by the EU Court of Justice. And what is advisable from my point of view, it's that should be the spreading and extending of the European Union Court of Justice jurisdiction according to the Treaty on the European Union law. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much in the name of the chair. Yes, what I want to say by my side is only that, you know, there is also a religious ceremony, 5, starting. Who wants to go there, please do that with the permission of Joachim. We will stay here, of course, for going on with Joachim's presentation, and then for discussion. At 6 o'clock we have to stop, of course. I personally also would have liked to come with you to the cathedral, but no, I have my obligation here, and it's also a pleasant obligation, of course. And yes, so with your permission, Joachim, we, yes, but we, okay. So I give my.
Yeah. So we have still half an hour and we have to continue with the discussion. Yeah. Okay. So, Professor Nergelius, you can continue on your very interesting subject as well. Oh, this is the crown of Council of Europe, as we often call it, European Convention of Human Rights and Judicial Protection.
Thank you very much, and then I will address the more secular part of the audience who prefer to stay. And first of all, of course, thanks to the organizers and to Rainer for once again organizing such a very nice conference, and in very nice surroundings in this beautiful theater, which I think is absolutely adorable. I'm going to talk about the topic of the European Convention of Human Rights and its relation to rule of law, its position in today's Europe. I will try to be brief. Je vais parler en anglais, mais je suis prêt de prendre des questions aussi en français. Y por supuesto también en español, si hay preguntas en esta lengua. Entonces, I think it's very important to stress that in the history, the European history after the Second World War, I don't think that the European Convention has ever had a more important role than today. And we can see this in many ways. There has never been so many cases pending before the European Court of Human Rights as today. Well, maybe that's not true. Maybe there were even more cases 5 years ago, because there was a procedural reform which has reduced the numbers slightly. But there are still more than 100,000 cases pending, and of course that's an extreme situation. It's absurd. So how do we explain this? I think we all know that the situation in Europe has changed after the 1990s, after 1989 and the fall of the Berlin Wall. We've had a great development within the European Union, but we've had perhaps an even greater development within the Council of Europe, of which we don't talk so much. We have today still 28 member states in the European Union, but we have 48, 47, depending on how you count, in the Council of Europe. In fact, all European states are today members of the Council of Europe. And in order to be a member of the Council of Europe, it's necessary, it's compulsory to sign the European Convention of Human Rights. So already here we have a very important element. And then if we look at the jurisprudential development, I think also a lot of things changed in the 1990s that perhaps we don't talk so much about. With new member states in the Eastern and Central Europe, with former Soviet republics turning independent, with Russia becoming a member, and Turkey, there were totally new human rights situations that were suddenly subject to review by the Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. And many of them relate, for instance, to ethnic minorities. We have the situation of minorities in Turkey, in Russia. We have Russian people living in Latvia, Hungarian people living in Slovakia or Romania, and I don't know. So a lot of issues related to that, to these kind of issues. In relation to right of property, which I've studied a little bit closer, we have the whole situation of restitution in many Eastern European countries, where people came back after the fall of communism and claiming property that their parents or ancestors had owned many years before. So this is a totally new situation. It has put the European Court of Human Rights in the very center of legal attention in relation to human rights law. And I would say today that there is so much new jurisprudence coming out from the Strasbourg Court that even experts, such as most of us sitting here, can't really catch up. We can't really follow everything that happens. We don't know all the new cases coming from the Strasbourg Court. And sometimes, and I will come back to this, but sometimes you see, for example, the Court of Justice in Luxembourg referring to case law from the Court of Human Rights. But maybe in some controversial cases I've studied this, it's not very convincing. And the reason is not that the Court of Justice is not, as such, doing a good job. The reason is that there is so much case law from the Strasbourg Court that it's very easy for anyone. Anyone who wants to make a legal claim can quote 2 or 3 judgments from the Strasbourg Court in favor of his or her argument. But at the same time, there may be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 cases pointing in another direction. And this has created a situation where, well, maybe we could talk of inflation in terms of judgments coming from the European Court of Human Rights. And this is not perhaps perfect from a rule of law situation. At the same time, even if we have this somewhat problematic background in our mind, at the same time, we have at least 2 very different new rules for the Court of Human Rights and for the Convention of Human Rights today. From the more problematic point of view, Professor Rideau referred to the opinion 213 from December 2014, which says that the European Union should not adhere to the European Convention of Human Rights. We have to live with that. Maybe after the somewhat controversial opinion, you expected a lot of discussion, but we haven't seen that so far. And there's not very much activity taking place in this field, as far as I can see. Maybe we will face a risk that the 2 European courts will somehow deviate from each other in their respective jurisprudence. This is because before the Charter of Fundamental Rights entered into force, we had a situation where both courts applied the European Convention of Human Rights. And in case there was some disagreement, it was more or less understood that the Court of Human Rights had the last word. It also happens, I think it still happens, that the judges in Strasbourg and Luxembourg meet twice a year in order to discuss new cases and new issues that occur. However, with the opinion 213, with some other controversial judgments, such as notably the Meloni case from 2013, the risk to me is obvious that the Court of Justice will start to apply the Charter of Fundamental Rights, over which, of course, the Court of Human Rights has no jurisprudence. If you look closer at the Charter of Fundamental Rights, which has already been mentioned here, you see that it's a combination of 2 different kinds of rights. We have a number of rights which also belong in the European Convention of Human Rights, the traditional political civil liberties, if you so want, if you so wish. But we also have a number of social and economic rights which seem to originate from the jurisprudence of the Court of Justice and from secondary EU law. Now, if the Court of Justice starts to apply the Charter of Fundamental Rights more often, instead of applying the same rights, similar rights, equivalent rights in the European Convention, then the risk to me increases that sooner or later the 2 courts will not have the same, will not make the same kind of judgments, will not have the same jurisprudence, and will perhaps drift apart. And that's a real problem, I think, for the future. At the same time, and this is my last remark, I see a clear role for the Court of Human Rights in some of the new, recent rule of law issues which have occurred in Europe and within the European Union in the last 5 or 6 years, notably in relation to more and more authoritarian regimes, notably in Hungary, but of course also in Poland and maybe also some other countries in Eastern and Central Europe, where it seems clear that the government, the parties in power, do not care so much about rule of law and human rights in the traditional manner, and seem very keen to impose their own views on how the state is being governed, even at the expense of being condemned by the European Union. Professor Rideau mentioned the Copenhagen criteria in Article 7. In fact, in order to impose sanctions on a member state, such as Hungary or Poland, it is not enough with a qualified majority. It requires unanimity. And this has put the European Union in a very, very difficult situation in the last 2 or 3 years. Here, I see a role for the Court of Human Rights. This has not been so much observed, but I think we can see people in Hungary and Poland and some other countries which are affected by these sad developments, problematic developments, bringing cases to the Court of Human Rights, which is interesting. Human rights cases, but in a way outside the EU law context. And here I think the Court of Human Rights may have a role to fulfill in relation to rule of law in the next few years, because some of these cases are very similar to cases that we've already seen in the Court of Justice, not least in the last year, whether or not you can extradite criminals to Poland or not, if they are to be given a fair trial in Poland or not, whether judges, changes in the conditions for judges in Portugal are acceptable or not, and with the hypothesis that they will also perhaps occur in other member states. We've even seen the Court of Justice in October impose temporarily prohibitions against changes of the rules on the Supreme Court in Poland. So these issues are very controversial, but they belong within a bigger political context within the European Union. Some other human rights issues and rule of law issues related to this development, but for some reason falling a bit outside the specific EU law context, may be brought instead to the Court of Human Rights. I think we have only seen the beginning of this, and this may in fact be one of the key activities, key roles, so to speak, for the Court of Human Rights in the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nargelius, for your very interesting insights, especially on the collaboration between the two courts, supranational and European International Court that we have here in the face of Strasbourg Court. Well, there are so many interesting questions, of course, and I think there will be a discussion, and you'll be willing to add, but already we have touched the basic sides or the basic angles of multi-level construction of the rule of law in Europe. Actually, it's not only constitutional pluralism that we are talking about, but it's a multi-level governance and regulation. Of course, it's not like within a state regulation. It's very different from the Keynesian concept, but we have many interesting interactions and problems that are ahead. And only before giving the word for the discussion, I would say that protection outside, actually, one of my predecessors, the Spanish Advocate General, that was Mr. Villalón, who said that protection of human rights in Europe has become a crowded house, because now we have national protection, we have European protection before the court in Strasbourg. We have protection for the members of the European Union before the court in Luxembourg. So there are many, many ways to go to protect human rights now in Europe. So who will be willing to take part in the discussion? Yes, with great pleasure I give the floor to my colleague Miroslav Granat, who has been often a member of this family of Reinhard Arnold's family, which started before many years in Regensburg and now expands all over Europe. And I'm very happy to be part of this family. Thank you, Reinhard, for all this organization. And please, Miroslav, you have the floor.
J'ose dire un petit peu en français, peut-être, si c'est possible, parce que je voudrais faire la petite remarque à propos de l'intervention de mon collègue, professeur Bertrand Mathieu, à propos de la distinction de l'identité européenne et l'identité nationale dans l'Europe contemporaine. C'est très, très intéressant pour moi parce que j'étudie l'identité nationale et constitutional identity spécifiquement. Et alors, je pense que la distance entre l'identité européenne et l'identité nationale n'est pas grande. Alors, d'après moi, bien sûr, ce ne sont pas les synonymes, l'identité européenne et l'identité nationale, mais je suis sûr, je pense que l'élément commun entre l'identité européenne et l'identité nationale, c'est la dignité humaine. Alors, je suis tranquille que la discussion entre les deux, d'un côté l'identité nationale et l'identité européenne, est très très importante, très très valable, mais la distance n'est pas grande, d'après mon opinion. C'est tout. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention.
Merci beaucoup pour cette remarque. Alors, je partage tout à fait ce point de vue que la dignité de la personne humaine est incontestablement le socle commun. Ce que je voulais dire sur la différence des identités, très rapidement, c'est qu'il y a des domaines sur lesquels il n'y a pas la même conception. C'est le cas notamment en matière de religion. Il est évident que la position française sur la laïcité n'est pas la même position que dans d'autres pays par rapport à la religion. Et la laïcité à la française, c'est pas mieux qu'un autre système et pas moins bien qu'un autre système, c'est différent simplement. Et je crois que là, il y a une différence. Et j'ajouterais qu'il y a quand même une différence aussi, me semble-t-il, c'est qu'il y a aujourd'hui des États qui finalement sont assez peu sensibles à leur identité nationale et il y a des États qui, après une longue histoire, ont besoin de retrouver une identité nationale parce que l'histoire leur a fait perdre. Elles se sont trouvées soumises à des empires divers. Et je crois qu'il y a aussi cette divergence par rapport à l'idée même d'identité. Ça ne veut pas dire que l'identité est différente, mais ça veut dire que le positionnement par rapport à la notion d'identité est différent. Donc je crois, mais je suis absolument d'accord qu'il y a cet élément absolument commun à la dignité. Mais cela dit, il faut quand même faire une nuance, parce que la conception de la dignité en Allemagne ou en France ou ces anglo-saxons, c'est pas la même. Et on s'aperçoit que si on est tous d'accord sur la dignité, on n'a pas forcément la même conception, objective ou subjective notamment, de la dignité.
Yes, of course I agree that these are different concepts and they have different histories, but actually also when we speak about European constitutional identity and national constitutional identities in Europe, we have to know that there is something that is very well known as European constitutional heritage. And as a part of European constitutional heritage, we have, of course, the ideas of rule of law, separation of powers, constitutional justice, and all other elements that were in the most of the works of Council of Europe and also Venice Commission. And I'm very happy that here also the work of the Venice Commission was well cited, because there is a lot that has been done by the Venice Commission in the area of the rule of law, and especially in the area of soft law about the rule of law in Europe by the Venice Commission. There are also some very interesting bridges, because I'm proud also to have been part of Venice Commission for more than 10 years. So there are very, very interesting bridges about the rule of law in common law concept and in European concept, also connected with the Rechtsstaat or État de droit concept, because there are also some indicators that have been worked out by American Bar Association, by the Mexican and Latin American colleagues also, when they worked in the area of rule of law. So there is a great work that has been done, but a lot of this work is also ahead to be done. And more in the practical concept, practical things to be secured, all these concepts of the rule of law in the practice of European states here. So anyone that is willing to take part in the discussion is welcome. Yeah?
Well, as we speak about rule of law, this is a national concept, a European concept, a universal concept. And I think that today there is only one type of constitution. This is, if we look back to the 1789 Declaration in France, it was said that there is no constitution without separation of powers and of peut-être droits humains, je sais pas, mais I think it could be, I would say, it's my perspective, but there are of course many different traditions, and there are differences, of course, but there are core elements which are, I would say, universal in the sense that they are recognized in all the liberal democratic constitutions. And lastly, I would say from my standpoint that the very basis is human being, and law is for human being the ultimate finality, as we say, jus hominum causa, but it's also in constitutional law. The human person has, this was a development in history and has become, despite all violations and threats to human dignity, but has become the central point. What is, I think there is nothing else what could be have value in this sense, and so this value is necessarily connected with freedom, with the rule of law, in this sense that if I or if I focus on this anthropocentric approach, then it is, let's say, the human person as the supreme value. And this is, if we call this dignity, yes, then we can say that a twin sister, of course, of dignity is freedom. There is no dignity without freedom, no freedom without dignity, even if it's not written in a constitution. And freedom means it's a principle. Of course, freedom, while dignity is not shareable, it is not, cannot be limited, but freedom necessarily is limited. It must be shared with the community. And so here we have maybe always the tension between freedom and restriction of freedom. And now all over the world there is principle of proportionality, and maybe in a very much difference. You're sometimes different, but nevertheless it means that the restriction must be necessary, indispensable, and there must be a ponderation between freedom or the individual interest and the public interest. And then there is a guarantee of the very the nucleus of this freedom, what we call this is the contenido esencial, means oui, peut-être en français c'est essence des droits fondamentaux qui ne peuvent pas être, which cannot be touched, so to say. But I think that rule of law is, on the one hand, the recognition of dignity and freedom as expressed by the Constitution. So the Constitution is, I think they will incorporate these basic values, and of course it is different in tradition and all over, but the basic ideas are common. And this comes from the emancipation of the human being. I think what, despite all the violations we know, of course, has come up in a historically developing conscience of the importance of the individual. And I think this is the only possibility to see something what is a constitution somehow, I would say like that. So, and despite all differences, maybe there is this common core element, and without this core element there is no constitution, I would say. And of course we have many countries which refer to democracy, but it's not a democracy, well, only in a formal sense, or even not in a formal sense. It is something what is an abuse of the term, of terminology for political reasons. So we have many examples in the world today, that's clear, and yes, but nevertheless, we have also this very powerful concept of this, what we would say, liberal democratic constitution concept, and this is, but you find the same with differences, I think, on the national as well as on the supranational, or not international but supranational level. And even in international law, more and more, we have also constitutional elements, so the fundamental rights or human rights conventions, which are more and more jus cogens, and obligations erga omnes. So we see that there are particular points of constitutional law also there. So rule of law is, we had one conference, I remember many years ago in Regensburg. There was our British colleague who said, this is a secular religion, rule of law. So but maybe it's a universal value which has to be, or is the message of today, I hope.
Sure, yeah, it's very important.
The theater is asking us for to leave, because there's an opera.
So we have to leave in 10 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So if I can use just one sentence to say, I would like to thank first all the participants and speakers, and especially to thank once more Professor Rainer Arnold, who has been the heart of all our discussions and organizing all our meetings, indispensable for the rule of law discussion as well.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, but it's not. No, I thank you all, and yeah. But as I like to look into the future, not backwards, so I want to say that in October we will be in Vilnius, invited by the Constitutional Court and organized, and then we look forward to May 2020 in Ukraine, in Lviv. Yes, and now, yes, you must say, excuse me, was I right, or? Yes, okay, thank you. So Stanislav confirms me. I was formulating now, of course, very a bit prudently, because saying we look forward, not to have already affirmed it, but this would be, of course, very fine. And I think both presidents of constitutional courts, Lithuania and Ukraine, to be there, and to yes, to how to say, to carry on this tradition. This would be fine, and there is even an option beyond. Beyond means in October, maybe to 2020. I'm not sure if I'm authorized to say this, but there is some looking for Batumi, for Georgia. Yeah. So then, with this, I will close. I thank you very much for being here. At 7:30, the bus will start from before, yes, to the hotel, and at 9 o'clock, it's late for us, but it's early for Spanish people. We will, as yesterday, we are offered a dinner in our in Consejo General del Notariado. It will not be the same as the rest of yesterday. No, it is promised to be quite a new thing. And yes, and tomorrow it's at 8, let's say 8 or 8:15, they told me, but it's better to say 8. The bus will come, and then we go here. And yes, and then we have, well, our 2 parts and one, yes, so ceremonies, let's say, and then after the closing, I think it's about 2 p.m. If, yeah, on the details will be informed maybe tomorrow, yes. And so some of us go to Malaga. Who go to Malaga, we must inform them what will we do with the luggage. I think we put it in the bus, but this I must have confirmed. I do not know yet. This is, yes. And then, the colleagues who remain, stay here, as I told already, we will have then visit to Prado and so on, and with Maria and the colleagues. Tomorrow there was a list. I'm not sure if you have filled in that we have an impression who will do this. And I think wasn't it 5 o'clock that you meet, or for 5? Yes. So you have some time between. And this, of course, is optional. It's not, as all of our events are not obligatory events, but optional. And yes, but then have a good day. And for those who remain here, in the hotel at least, they have a dinner which is offered by the organization. And but if you prefer to be, I don't know, in a Basque restaurant or somewhere in the town, then you are free, of course, at your own risk and expenses. Yes, but okay. Yeah, then thank you so much, and then let's go on like that.